Good afternoon. My name is Kelli Carnahan from Ask Resource Center, and I will be hosting this webinar along with my colleague Susie Lund. We are the training coordinators for Ask. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to share about Ask Resource Center. Ask is a family-focused nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower families of people with disabilities. We provide individual support, collaborative advocacy, training, resources, and leadership development for Iowa families of children with disabilities or special healthcare needs, ages birth through 26, and the professionals who serve them. On our screen, you can see our 6 values that we have as an organization, and we try to uphold those every day. During this 3-part series, we will be covering the following 10 sections in the IEP. The last few sections have covered the first 6 sections of an IEP. If you have not seen those webinars, you can find them on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/askresource. Today, we will be discussing services, activities, supports, accommodations, and additional considerations. After the presentation, you will be able to identify the services, activities, and supports, accommodations, and additional considerations within an IEP, understand the purpose of each section, and recognize important information needed in each section. Before going into detail, a few things to highlight about how to determine services, support, and activities. These are all team decisions made based off of the PLAF and annual goals. Remember, the PLAF summarizes the learner and helps set the stage for the IEP. If you need more information about the PLAF, please go to our YouTube page and watch part 1 of the series. The services, supports, and activities must be clear and easily understood. If the child were to move or receive a different teacher, they should be able to pick up and read the IEP and continue it. Making sure the description is clear will help make sure there is not confusion on how to follow the IEP and that everyone is following it the same way as intended. These services, supports, and activities could be provided to the learner, parents, or family, and/or to school personnel. While they can be provided to anyone on the team, it all comes back to helping the student. First, we are going to discuss services within the IEP. Services are ongoing actions provided to the student over time. These actions are purposeful and designed to meet the student's needs outlined in the PLAF and annual goals. The IEP team must include a clear and comprehensive description of each service, along with how often the student is receiving the service, how long the instruction time is, where the instruction happens, and who is leading the instruction. Let's take a look at what this could look like within an IEP. At the top of the table, you will see a heading for services, activities, supports, and accommodations. Once you find this page, you will see subheadings labeling the table sections. We are looking for 5 different things: the start date, the frequency of instruction, removal from general education, the provider, and the description that passes the stranger test. Highlighted in teal, you can see the time frame for this service. In this example, you can see the service lasts for the year the IEP is active. Highlighted in orange, you will see how often and how long the service is. For example, Bill will receive 45 minutes of reading instruction a week. You can see that it is written for a week timeline. You can ask the IEP team for more details on how often the instruction typically occurs. Meaning, for Bill, he could receive 9 minutes of instruction a day, or maybe the team has decided 15 minutes 3 days a week. It is okay for the IEP team to keep the frequency in a larger time period, like weeks or months, as long as these minutes are being met within that time period. Highlighted in blue, you will see how many minutes your child is removed from the general education classroom for this service. Not all services require the student to leave the general education classroom to receive their services. In this example, you will see Bill is removed from the general education classroom for the whole reading instruction. However, you will see Bill does not leave the classroom for his paraprofessional supports. The IEP team will decide how often the student needs to be removed for services or instruction. Some schools have found great systems for co-teaching, where the special education teacher comes into the general education classroom to help provide services to the student within the gen ed classroom. This might not be the best option for every student. If the PLAF states that the student learns best in a small group instruction with minimal distraction, it may be best for the service to be provided in the special education classroom to ensure the best learning. Highlighted in purple, you will see who is responsible for providing this service. This allows us to know how responsibilities are being delegated throughout the team, and this allows you as a parent to know who to contact if you have questions. Providers may be the special education teachers, service coordinators, AEA staff, etc. It is not highlighted, but the description should be clear enough for everyone to read and able to follow. In this example, we see Bill needs instruction working on decoding and blending CCVC words, or consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant words, like the word step, fluency in reading, and reading sight words. If Bill were to move, his new teacher will be able to understand what skills he is working on and can continue that instruction. Now we will look at activities and supports. Activities and supports are specialized adjustments that help the student take part in and get the most out of school programs and chances to learn. Unlike regular school activities, this help doesn't need to be scheduled in detail, like counting minutes. When planning in the student's IEP, the team doesn't have to make strict schedules or keep a close eye on the progress. Activities and supports have a similar table to services. However, it does not require a specific frequency of time and a removal from general education. These supports are there to help throughout the day or when it is needed for the student. We do still see who is responsible for the activities and supports being included throughout the day. While it does say the special education teacher will ensure these are in place, it is still expected that any person who works with the student does need to follow what is written. Just because they are not listed as the provider does not mean they do not have to follow it.
Everybody, I'm going to talk to you about accommodations and then wrap it up with the additional considerations at the end of the IEP. So first, we are going to talk about accommodations. And the information that we're sharing today comes from pacer.org, which is another parent training information center. And we wanted to share with you that when you have accommodations on an IEP, it allows a student to complete the same task as the other students, but there might be changes in the following bullet points: in timing, formatting, setting, scheduling, response, or presentation. So we have a few examples of what those might look like in an IEP for a student. So for example, in timing, Olivia will have extended time to complete tests. So you might see chunking of schedules as well, that a student might need a shortened amount of time and then take a break. So those would also be timing sort of examples. A formatting is another kind of an accommodation. Noah will have access to large print materials for reading. So this could also be Braille. This could also be just different ways of presenting material for Noah. Setting is another accommodation. Ellie needs a workstation with minimal distractions for independent work is another example for setting sorts of accommodations. The next two, one is scheduling. Mateo requires frequent non-contingent breaks throughout the day. So these are just things that are in our student schedule regardless of of how that student's day is going. And then another example of an accommodation is response or presentation. Ava may use a speech to text or typing instead of writing by hand. So these are all sorts of accommodations that can be written into an IEP. These are just examples that we have come up with. You know your son or daughter the best, and so you'd be able to really help think about, like, what are some things that will really help level the playing field for your child. All right, I'm going to wrap it up with additional considerations, just those last little check marks that you have at the end of each IEP meeting. There are 4 of them. We talk about extended school year services, physical education, assessments, and least restrictive environment. So we will move into extended school year. A lot of times this is sort of confusing for a lot of members of an IEP team. Extended school year services are more than summer school. They're more than nice to have. They are some services that absolutely need to happen in order for your child to continue to have a free, appropriate public education. So they are provided beyond the school year, and they are needed. So these are 4 questions that the IE team would answer when thinking about do we need extended school year services. First, we look at the goal areas. Are there certain goals that you look at and think, oh, if we don't have these services throughout this break, that they're going to be significantly impacted. A student may have several goals, but we might think, wow, it's the reading goal that we need to focus on because we've seen that when there are breaks, that's really affected. So we're going to focus in on that reading goal. Secondly, has there been or is there potential for significant regression during periods of interruption? This might be really clear. You might see that when your child came back from summer break, it took a really long time, like even more time than is expected of a learner to get back to where they were at the last of the school year. So you may have that hard data, but you also may have, this could be a team decision where you could say, we all think as members of this IEP team that there will be significant regression based on what we know about the child. So this is another aspect of extended school year. The third is, are there rare and unusual circumstances? And are there other factors? I'm not going to go into detail of all the rare and unusual circumstances and other factors to be considered. However, we are going to make sure that if you look in the comments of our YouTube channel, there's going to be a document there. And that lists a lot of the rare and unusual circumstances and other factors to be considered when it comes to extended school year services. I really think that the main point that essentially ESY is not a nice to have. It's services that if they're not in place, they affect the child's right for a free, appropriate public education. The decisions that are made are individualized, and it's really based on your IEP team to answer these questions and think, do we need extended school year services? Moving in to our next consideration. Quickly, this may be just something that happens really fast at your IEP meeting, but we need to talk about how is your child going to be participating in physical education. There are 3 ways that the child could participate. In general PE, no accommodations are necessary. Modified might be there just might be some things that your child might need. They might need an individualized warm-up routine. They might need adaptive equipment. They might need instructional accommodations. These are things that your team will work through to make sure that PE is meaningful and that your child is participating. The last way is specially designed. This one would be that it requires substantial adaptation of the curriculum or specialized curriculum development in order for the child to participate. So the PE program would be tailored with the learner's needs in mind in the areas of motor development, play, fitness, recreation, and lifetime leisure. The next consideration we have is assessments. We need to think about how is your child going to be participating in those district-wide assessments. The IDEA requires the involvement of all students with IEPs in the general curriculum and in district-wide assessments. This requirement reflects the belief that learners with disabilities are more likely to benefit from high expectations when their performance is included in district-wide assessment processes. So, the children with IEPs can participate without accommodations, with accommodations, or through Iowa's alternate assessments. Those accommodations would really reflect what we talked about earlier in the IEP. What accommodations does the child need? And then what will we make sure that they have access to during those achievement tests? The Iowa alternate assessment is a bit different. This is the assessment where students with significant cognitive disabilities are still participating in those statewide assessments. It is through a different kind of assessment, the alternate assessment, called the dynamic learning map assessment. So there are 3 requirements for an IEP team to decide if a student needs alternate assessment. One is the student has a significant cognitive disability. 2, they receive instruction on the Iowa Core Essential Elements. Now, the Iowa Core Essential Elements are Iowa Core, but they are reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity. So that means that they're still having access to the big ideas. They're not as complex as perhaps the general education core standards. And then the third requirement for a student to participate in alternate assessment is they require extensive, direct, individualized instruction and substantial support to achieve gains. So again, these are all individualized decisions. We make them as IEP teams. These are questions that you would consider when thinking, maybe alternate assessment would be a better way for us to understand what a student knows and is able to do rather than the regular district-wide assessments. Okay, the last consideration that we're going to talk about is least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment allows learners to receive appropriate education to the maximum extent of interaction with peers without disabilities. You will see on your IEP this graph that will show the percentage that the child is in special education. So this is important because statute says removal from the general education environment may only occur if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. Again, IEP teams make this decision together. Where is the best place for the child to receive their education? And then where Kelli was talking earlier in the services section, there may be that the child requires 45 minutes of reading instruction and 20 of those are going to be removed and the other 25 are in general education. So this is, again, IEP teams to make those decisions. And this is our contact information. You can use our website to have a contact request, or you can call and leave a message and someone will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you for attending our webinar today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on Facebook for daily tips and information. Have a wonderful day.